Yeah, so now we continue chapter 5. We are in the area, right? We just finished basically those two statements more directly related to these knowledge and practice of the channels, winds, and drops. Channels, winds, and drops. So the last statement we looked at was statement 13, where Gilbert Rinpoche, may be shocking to some people, actually says that insofar as these information and knowledge about the winds, drops, and channels, the tantras themselves, what the tantras tell us about the winds, drops, and channels, in fact, from the medical perspective, is really not so detailed. It's rather general. But those who are trained in the medical tradition understand the winds, drops, and channels in much more details. And to me, this is also sort of saying, like we should not be kind of confused, what we mean by supreme healing and ordinary healing. The supreme healing of the Buddhists is beyond this body and even this emotional, this bunch of emotions in this body. In the West, and increasingly in Asia, I see this too. People are starting to link physical health with spiritual health. Yeah, of course. Especially for beings that are still tethered to this body, you and I. If our physical body is unwell, it's hard for us to be spiritually stable. So to that degree, you have to take care of body, you have to take care of mind. But to remember that, in the end, this supreme healing that we're talking about doesn't care about what your body feels and how emotionally you're feeling today, because those are to be transcended. So at the end of the notes for statement 13, namely that Vajradhara did not teach these medical practices in the Tantra, but also that the knowledge of the channels, winds, and drops, ways of being and functioning are more profoundly expressed in the medical literature. So for purposes of healing body, and even healing like emotional body, maybe then you need to turn to the medical tradition. For purposes of transcending this, to achieve supreme healing, then you look to the tantras, the way of teaching you how to use the knowledge of the winds, drops, and channels. In fact, yeah, many teachers, at least looking from the outside, their health is unstable. So you cannot link, like, their level of attainments to the superficial appearance of their health, good or bad. If their health is bad and it impacts their ability to practice and to teach, then, we say we should understand that as our loss, meaning those who need to be helped it's principally our loss, because the Guru's health is not stable enough for us to continuously receive guidance. As for the Guru's mind, we have no idea where he is, where she is. I mean, even if we train to see the Guru's mind as Dharmakaya, of course, I'm talking about the, relative level. Right? We have no idea where the Guru's mind is. The Guru's body could be, beset with ailments. But that doesn't mean the Guru's mind is afflicted. So now then to 14 and 15, which is the same point, kind of emphasized slightly differently. The point says, statement 14. What is profound for others is not profound for us. What is not profound for others is profound for us. This is said in response to people claiming that the pith instructions, all of these secret information on channels and winds, are more profound than the Buddha's instructions on how to guard the 3 vows and so forth. So these are people who get very excited with winds, drops, and channels, and including, even if this language is not used, people who are very excited by, very profound states of like mind and visions and, seeing this and feeling that and all those things. Thinking that, those must be really profound, Let's see here, it says no. Now, let's look at Chodra's commentary. The later result does not arise without a cause that is accomplished earlier. And all the fortunes of the Chakravartin king, the universal monarch, depend first on his birth in the royal family and the gradual perfection of his physical and mental faculties. So Chodra gives an example. A great universal monarch, an emperor that rules over the entire world, can only be so because, first of all, he was born in a royal family. And then, not only that, through proper training and maturing as the prince and then crown prince and everything, that then becomes a universal monarch. So in the same way, Khyalpa Rinpoche is not saying, winds and drops practices have no place. He's saying that you cannot properly use those things. Your practice of those things will not bear fruit unless you have done the necessary work. So in other words, it's saying, the tool itself, as amazing as it is pointless unless you know how to use those tools. And and whether you know how to use those tools or not depends on proper training prior to that. Similarly, the Vajrayana path of maturation and liberation, which is the thing that is profound for others, has no support if it lacks the vows of refuge of the bodhisattvas and so forth, which are often not profound for others. Others think, that's just Buddhism for dummies. Moreover, for the mantra vowels to arise, the two lower vowels are indispensable. So in order to keep your mantra commitments, samayas, and all of that, if you did not have bodhicitta and the trainings to protect bodhicitta, and you can't really have bodhicitta vow if you don't have individual liberation vows. Meaning, more broadly, if you're not committed to being free yourself, talking about freeing others is kind of ridiculous. You don't even know what that means. And then without taking refuge, how do you take individual liberation vows? So sometimes we get carried away, because we hear that, oh, Vajrayana is the highest, is the most supreme, is the most sublime, right? Then we think, oh, and then in Vajrayana there are these samayas, Then we get very excited. We say, how do I keep my samaya? How do I keep my samaya? And it's like, do you know refuge commitments first? Are you keeping your refuge commitments? Probably not. Then if you're not keeping your refuge commitments, how do you keep individual liberation vows? Individual liberation vows, and then bodhisattva, and so on and so forth. So rather than focusing on what comes first and what comes next, we can easily get distracted by what comes at the end. And if we go about things that way, then we waste all our time and effort. Because whatever we build, we think we're building, so fancy, so high, so up there, they're all just going to collapse because they don't have a basis. So the so-called, or the often considered to be not so profound, not so important, not so amazing, they are the very basis. And in fact, I want to say that from other places, Gyalpa Rinpoche's statements clearly show that he says, and he teaches us to understand that whether at the most beginning level to all the way to the most profound level, we are essentially working on the same thing. It's just that the work becomes more and more refined. Like the analogy I like to use about, a carpenter preparing a beautiful, exquisite piece of, wood furniture, a table, a desk. For it to be this exquisite piece of work, he needs to know, first of all, where to source, right, this wood from. So the wood needs to have the potential as well. And in that sense, we say, of course, we all have that potential. We are born with that. That's the Buddha nature. So in that sense, that analogy, we don't need to worry too much about getting the wood with the right wood grain. Because we all have that potential. Then, following that analogy, then we need to know, in order to get that slab of wood that we're going to use, we need to use the right tool to cut that slab of wood. Then to plane that slab of wood so that it's all flat. And perhaps to straighten it if it is warped. Different tools, different very rough tools are used right at the beginning. Right? A chainsaw, a big planer, right? But as that piece of wood is being worked on, then the tools that you use will become more and more refined, more and smaller and smaller and smaller, in fact, until the very last stage, right? You are polishing like with a very soft cloth, the surface. So imagine trying to use that soft cloth to cut your slab of wood at the beginning. So imagine, you know, using your samaya to try to go control the afflictive emotions at the beginning. Not going to work too well, you know. Furthermore, even though concerning the empowerment as well, others hold the three higher empowerments to be profound. But here we maintain that the vase empowerment is the root and the higher empowerments are its branches. So this is not just applied like in one context generally, you know. In the Vajrayana, Mahayana, Hinayana is most profound, so to say, in this context. But even within each category, so even within the category of the four empowerments, often, many others will say, oh, the vase empowerment, that's just, you know, so that the other three can happen. And in fact, the other three, the fourth one is the most important one. Yes, Kyopa Rinpoche would agree. But here, Kyopa Rinpoche wants to emphasize, Buddha understood that for the majority, if not even, you know, like for all of us, there's really no way to be ripened by the fourth empowerment, for the fourth empowerment to take any real effect if the first empowerment, the work that needs to be done through the first empowerment has not already occurred. So then, these three higher empowerments are quite powerless in the absence of the first empowerment successfully doing what it's supposed to do. In other examples given, in one example, it is said that in the 10 Bodhisattva bhumis, the 10 Bodhisattva levels, achieving the first bhumi is considered to be the most crucial. Of course, the 11th bhumi is Buddhahood. In Vajrayana, it's called the 13th bhumi. There's like further, you know, kind of details. But generally, we can say just in the sutra system, the 11th bhumi is the Buddha state. And the 8th bhumi is when you become irreversible. You won't fall back. You have basically achieved it's said to be when you have already left, you have already become freed from samsara. But you have not achieved the full knowledge of a Buddha yet on the 8th bhumi. But it's said that the first bhumi is the most crucial. And the first bhumi is also the hardest to get to. But they say once you get the first bhumi, it's like a bird, they say. When a bird, right, is taking flight, as it pushes off the ground or the surface, the bird has to flap its wings really rigorously. Just like a plane, you know, during takeoff is said to be like the most dangerous time. And landing. It needs to flap its wings, this bird. But when and it will continue to flap its wings until it reaches a certain elevation, the bird. And once this bird has reached that elevation, then the wings barely move anymore. It's just using a slight movement of the of its wings. It can go up, it can go down, it can go sideways, like a vulture, No more like flapping, flapping, flapping. Likewise. Now we need to flap, 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 So at the foundational level, it seems like we're always just flapping, 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 Sometimes it just feels like you are a fish on land, Until you reach that level. Then, from first bhumi on, it says you can just go to the second bhumi, third bhumi, fourth bhumi, very gracefully. Until the first bhumi. Quite a bit of struggle. Quite a bit of pushing. And so here we maintain the vase empowerment as the root of all the other three empowerments. So Jigten Sumgen says, even though others say that the higher supreme empowerments are profound, I value the vase empowerment greatly. It is like a basis, a container, and a body. The other empowerments are its particulars. So this example used by Gyoba Rinpoche is to me more than just saying that the vase empowerment is a preliminary or a necessary foundation for the other three higher empowerments. To me, this quote is even saying, from beginning to end of using the Vajrayana method, the vase empowerment is it. The other three are just bringing out the full implications of what's going on in the vase empowerment. So during the Samadhi empowerment teachings, a few months back, we have looked at this issue of the vase empowerment. The vase empowerment being the most important. That is the vase empowerment. It's the empowerment that reveals, teaches the knowledge of how our five aggregates are the five Buddhas, and the four elements are the four female Buddhas. The sense consciousnesses are the male bodhisattvas, and the sense objects are the female bodhisattvas. In other words, the vase empowerment is the Vajrayana way of bringing home the realization that I am Buddha. So the other three higher empowerments are there to carefully unpack the basic package of first empowerment, vase empowerment. So furthermore, the Hevajra Tantra says, first they offer the sustenance and purification ceremony, then they should train in the 10 rules of virtuous conduct, then they should be taught the Vaibhashya teachings, and then the Sautrantika, after that the Yogacara, and then the Madhyamaka. Then when they know all levels of mantra, they should begin with Hevajra. And so this is from the Hevajra Tantra, showing how all these different things are to be successively built upon before your practice of Hevajra can really bring the kind of results that it says it can bring. Therefore, as middle and old age do not occur without childhood, similarly, the intention is that what is not profound for others is profound for us. It is the ground supporting the other subsequent teachings, and the higher stories are not built without the lower. The higher floors of a building cannot be built without the lower. So in the notes, other people, Dorje Sherab says, state that the mantra vow system is more profound than the pratimoksha vows. The mantra vehicle more profound than the vehicles of perfection. Absolute bodhicitta more profound than relative. Supreme yoga tantra more profound than the other tantra. The fourth empowerment more profound than the other three. The path of desire more profound than the path of liberation. The completion stage more profound than the generation or the creation stage, and so forth. According to Jigten Sumgön's view, the Vajrayana path of maturation and liberation needs the uninterrupted support of the vows of refuge, of pratimoksha, of the bodhisattvas, and so forth. And for the mantra vows to arise, the existence of the two lower vows is indispensable. Advaya Vajra, which is I think another name for Maitripa, clearly expresses a very similar idea. According to him, the preliminaries, consisting in this case of such things as taking refuge and its vows, making water offerings to Jambala, cultivating love, compassion, rejoicing, and equanimity, and making mandala offerings, are not merely preliminary, but also primary in the sense that they are a continuously constituted foundation of tantric practice. So, making water offerings to Jambala, we think that this is for wealth, ordinarily. But actually, for Maitripa, this great Mahamudra master, in one of the texts he gives for the foundations that is necessary for Mahamudra practice, he emphasizes the practice of refuge, the practice of vows, keeping vows, making water offerings to Jambala, making mandala offerings, cultivating love, compassion, equanimity, joy, the four immeasurable minds, so on and so forth. This is certainly also Jigten Sumgön's intention, or Jigten Sumgön's thinking, as it is clearly stated in Vajra Statement 2.14. The idea, as also expressed elsewhere in the text, is that the paths and methods to be practiced are not like a ladder where with each new step a rung is left behind. Instead, throughout the entire path, each part is continually developed into a more and more refined form until perfection is obtained. Luminosity, absolute truth, for instance, is a gnosis attained on the path of seeing that remains the same realization, only more and more refined until the path is completely traversed, until the path is completed. So we already saw this, in chapter 4, statement 18. The essence of mindfulness, too, is something that is essentially the same from its onset up to the state of Buddhahood. And all samadhis from the path of accumulation onward are in essence the Vajra-like samadhi, through which one finally breaks through to Buddhahood. Dorje Sherab sums up his comments stating, the single intention teaches just this topic throughout. If you understand it in this manner, you will understand all the topics of the single intention. Earlier, principally, we're working with the same thing. It's not like at different levels you're working with different things. You're working with the same thing. It's just that the work becomes more and more refined, more and more refined, more and more refined. Furthermore, Rinchen Changchup explains that while the higher cannot exist without the lower alone is in fact able to produce all the results. Oh, this is even more powerfully stated. Now, if you know how to practice the so-called Hinayana, it itself can give rise to all the qualities. Taught at higher levels. But if you try to achieve any of the higher levels without this lower one, it will not happen. So he says, if the lower dharmas are lacking, one will not be able to pass beyond samsara, even if one practices the profound topics of mantra. If one assembles all dharmas, that is the best. So the best is, yes, bring all together. The 84,000, bring all together. That is the best. And that's generally the approach, in Tibetan Buddhism. Bring all together. However, if one practices the lower, even though one has not assembled all the higher teachings, the happiness of samsara will arise, and nirvana will even be obtained based on only the pratimoksha. Therefore, we teach that the lower is profound. Now, to elaborate on this further is the next statement. Lacking the so-called non-profound instructions, meaning like the more preliminary things, one will not attain Buddhahood through the profound ones, or the so-called profound ones, meaning the channels, the winds, the drops, and I would include Mahamudra, Dzogchen, very fashionable these days. This is Dzogchen, then this is the essence of Dzogchen, then this is the essence of the essence of the essence of Dzogchen, non-stop, Then, I'm sorry to say this, lamas and their marketing device now, there's also no limit, this is the most profound of the most profound of the most profound. This is the most profound of the most profound of the most profound of the most profound. Blah, 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 blah. Then, of course, we get excited, we chase around, we run around, hoping for, some magic to happen. So the commentary to this statement says, now to discuss the meaning that was just explained, that is, the non-profound instructions such as the vehicle of the perfections, even just refuge and resolve and so forth. Without them, it may be possible that supernormal powers of any of the non-Buddhist sects and of the practices common to Buddhists and non-Buddhists arise by mastering only the practices of channels and winds. Yes, however, it is not possible to achieve Buddhahood. In fact, if you practice the winds and drops and manipulating energy, you can develop magical powers. Or you can become a great healer, as in healing the body. But you will not achieve Buddhahood, because you're using it for other purposes. To achieve Buddhahood, you must enter the gate of the teachings. If you lack refuge, you do not join the ranks of Buddhists. Here, not Buddhists in the cultural sense, Buddhists in the sense of one who practices the Dharma. If you do not possess any of the Pratimoksha vows, you do not belong to one of the four retinues of the Buddha, meaning that you are not part of the community of Sanghas. If you lack the twofold resolve for awakening, you have not planted the root of the Mahayana. If the meaning of empowerment has not arisen in your mind, the following maturation of your mental continuum is not possible. If you do not possess the stage of cultivation, creation stage, generation stage, which is primordially established, which is the way things are, the clinging to ordinary appearances is not warded off, and ground, path, and result is grasped as three different things. If that's the case, completion work. In fact, completion stage will sidetrack into nihilism. I know many of us, maybe because we were taught the generation stage of deity yoga not so well, and I take responsibility for that as well. Many of us then think that generation stage is so impossible, and that generation stage is so kind of like, I don't know, I just like to meditate. Usually when people say that, they mean, I want to keep my mind blank. And this is the warning here. That your so-called completion stage, where you dissolve everything, is simply a temporary state of pushing down things. And you feel a momentary relief from busyness. It is good. And then you think, this is completion stage. But it's not. This is, you have sidetracked, you have veered off into nihilism. So if the stage of completion endowed with signs is lacking, if you don't practice the generation stage, then you can sidetrack into nihilism. If the stage of completion without signs is lacking, you can sidetrack into eternalism. The two have to be practiced simultaneously. For these reasons, no matter what kind of dharma you practice, the complete preparation, main part, and conclusion, that is a correct progression of the path, is very important. So the great Lord Drigumpa said, practice through the dharmas of resolve for awakening, the deity of mantra, the guru, mahamudra, and dedication. This is the fivefold path. So another quote at the footnote. Until you have attained complete awakening, do not separate even for a single moment from the 5 vital points, which is the vital point of the resolve for awakening, bodhicitta, deity, guru, mahamudra, and dedication. The first, the practice of the resolve for awakening, is liberating from the lower vehicle, and it's a great method. Then visualize the primordially established deity of mantra that arises from that resolve. So the deity that arises, the idam, is none other than the resolve taking on a form. Moreover, if you have not realized your mind itself as the guru, the peg of your devotion does not hold. So, devotion to the guru, devotion to the guru, devotion to the guru, the peg of devotion will not hold, will not really be staked in. If you do not realize that your mind itself is this guru. So even though the method is to rely on a reference point that is currently outside of you, your human gurus, or the gurus of the past, even if the method relies on someone who is separate from you, if you don't realize that, in fact, what you're relying on is the nature of the guru, which is inseparable from your own nature, then all this talk of devotion doesn't work. Very good short teaching about what guru devotion is about. Therefore, practice the guru. Therefore, practicing, realizing that the final nature of the guru that you're relying on is the nature of your own mind. Within that state, then, place yourself in the meditative balance in Mahamudra, where samsara and nirvana are inseparable, where you no longer make preferences. Then you settle evenly. That's what I'm referring to settle evenly. And there are levels of settling evenly. So right now, at the beginning, we can just settle evenly by having the visual and the mind fall on, right? That 2 feet in front of us, that spot, that is settle evenly. That's just a very preliminary level of settling evenly. Then more advanced settling evenly until samsara and nirvana, these 2 mountains, becomes even. Having made all such virtue the common property of all beings of the 3 realms by transferring merit dedicated to awakening, leaving such paths of the profound vital points aside, saying, quote, I have become skilled in channels and winds. The Buddhahood of a person who possesses a realization that fills the whole world with noise is ornamented with black gowns and bone ornaments, and disregards cause and result, resembles the son of a barren woman and a sky lotus. The Buddhahood should be in quotes. The Buddhahood of a person who possesses a realization that fills the world with noise. Just a lot of talk, a lot of fanfare. Is ornamented with black gowns and bone ornaments. This is referring to some, even during Kyoba's time. They say, oh, I've gone beyond all conventions. So they dress strangely. They run around strangely. No. It says, this is nothing but the son of a barren woman and a sky flower. Meaning things that have no substance at all. Then Choda quotes from Jigten Sungben. The 360 methods of passionate union, some of these kind of sexual practices, I mean seemingly sexual, but really if the Mahasiddhas, when they engage in that, it's no longer, the way we think about. But anyway, the 360 methods of passion, winds, and vital essences are not profound. Only if they are pure within the sphere of luminosity are they the Buddha's teaching. This is taught by the victor as the vital point of profound Tantra. The other methods of passionate union are again and again proclaimed with great effort as non-dharma, non-Buddhist, meaning, non-dharma practice. Accomplished. In India, there's the Kama Sutra. Teaches all the, different ways of, enhancing your pleasure, your bliss. It says, yeah, this is all just that, Accomplish the suffering of samsara. All those are methods for accomplishing the suffering of samsara. Then if we are a little bit shy, we don't like to talk about these things, then we can talk about even how, right, the medical information of winds, drops, and channels, even if you master all of that, right? In the end, you still have to die. In the end, you still have to die. And if that is not directed at freedom from samsara, achieving Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings, then those methods become means of accomplishing the suffering of samsara. Here, first defeat, right? Where is that? He says it becomes the first defeat. Where was that? We just read that. He says, if you don't have these things, it just becomes...
It's the 7th line in the first paragraph.
Oh, okay. Good. It's the 7th line in the first paragraph. First paragraph. Wait, I'm lost now.
Page 451.
Oh, 451. Yes. That. Okay. Yeah. I've become skilled in channels and winds. One carelessly commits the first defeat. Here he is talking to his fellow monks and nuns. And there the first defeat is the defeat of sexual intercourse. So he's saying, if you don't, if you just say, oh, I'm practicing winds and drops, and with the implication of manipulating energy and seemingly like, oh, you practice with someone else, ideas like that, he says, then all you're doing is you're breaking your monk's vows, your nun's vows. They are, like, yes, of course, in the end, we say we cannot really know 100% certainty what the heck is going on. But there are, in contemporary times, many teachers. Many is unfortunate. I mean, many famous, somehow getting involved with their students and taking advantage of their students, either directly or indirectly implying that they're doing this winds, drops, and channels practices. And all that is going on is seemingly, as far as we can tell, creating the suffering of samsara. Then even when these things become public, people will say, oh, no. Some people, their vision of the guru is so pure that they say, oh, no. It's not really harm. But it's like when you look at the student, they are in great turmoil. Is that harm or not? Yeah, I think it is. Not one instance in Buddha Shakyamuni's conduct was there ever anything like this sort. Buddha Shakyamuni doesn't go like, challenge people, poke people, make them, like, oh, force them to be out of their comfort zone, to let them see, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that it is not possible to guide someone like that, yes, but how many, but even Buddha Shakyamuni did not use those methods. If you ask me, that is good enough for me. Even Buddha Shakyamuni did not use those methods, like shocking someone into, shaking them up from their complacency. No, Buddha Shakyamuni is very kind, gentle, inner, outer. Sometimes it's so easy for teachers to excuse, their own samsaric stuff, and say, "Oh, I'm being a good teacher." It's very easy to kind of lapse into things like that. And then when you have very devoted, in the wrong way, disciples, then you build up more samsaric suffering. Okay, that's it for today. So we'll do a final dedication. Chanchu semchu rinpoche ma ge ba nam ge gyurje ge ba nyam ba me ba yang gong ne gong du
Dr. Lai, before you go, I have a question. When you were talking about the base empowerment, are those also teachings that you gave in the summer that are in the channel under Samadhi empowerment?
They are in the Samadhi empowerment. They are also in the Gongchik.
Okay, I think I missed those, so I need to
review
those.
Oh yes.
So they're not all under Samadhi, but I can start reviewing those.
That'll be a good place to start, yes.
Okay.
The Samadhi videos, but they are also covered in the Gongchik statements under, I think, chapter 6. There are some in chapter 6, some in chapter 2.
Okay.
And even in chapter 1, chapter 2 is the dependent origination. Chapter 6 is the view, meditation, and conduct. And so scattered throughout there. And then the samadhi empowerment we talk. And I also shared another text, sections of another text called Empowerment. A book, there's a book. But I was only sharing sections from there. Sharing sections from The Garland of Views by Padmasambhava. There's one section from there, and I talked about that. I explained that, what race empowerment is and why and all of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, ta-ta, y'all.
Thank you.